Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and keep watching. So today I'm going to be talking about setting boundaries with your parents. Now, I've been asked to do this video quite a few times because of the story time that I have on my channel. So it's the first video on my channel and it's a story time about how I moved out before marriage, and I told my parents 2 days before I went to collect my keys. It's a very chaotic story time. If you want to know more details, go ahead and watch the video. But basically, the aim of this video is just to share my experience and my tips of how I progressed to setting boundaries, healthy boundaries between me and my parents. Being the eldest daughter from an immigrant family, I was exposed to quite a few things that maybe some of my younger siblings didn't have to think about. Being the eldest daughter from an immigrant family means, translating letters, acting as an interpreter for your parents. And I sort of grew up quite fast as a result. Growing up was quite difficult for us. We didn't have much, and I always had to learn to advocate for myself and also advocate for my parents and make sure that the system weren't screwing them over too much, things like that. And so that affected the relationship I had with my parents. As the eldest, we're kind of seen as like a third parent, especially if you're a daughter. So that sort of influenced over the years what our boundaries would look like. And it just got to a point where I was growing up now, I'm about to enter my 20s. I just felt like I hit a brick wall with my parents. It's very hard being the eldest and not doing a lot of things the traditional way. So I didn't go to uni, that caused some chaos. I wasn't pursuing careers that my parents understood, that caused chaos. There was just so many life decisions that I was making for myself and goals and ambitions I was pursuing that my parents just didn't understand because they grew up in a different time, different environment. They've come to a new country to give us a better life. So there's just things that they just didn't get. Where things got frustrating was it got to a point where I was being given adult responsibilities but still being treated like a child, which didn't add up to me. If you have seen the first video of my channel and you've seen that chaotic story time, you'll understand a bit more about where I'm coming from and how that sort of tension led to me moving out the way I did. But basically, there comes a time where you find that you're putting yourself in situations where you don't want to disappoint your parents, you don't want to upset them, you want to do right by them, you want to make sure that you have their blessings. Parents are very important in your life, right? But you get to a point where you're just spreading yourself so thin that you forget to look after yourself sometimes, and you sort of just get lost in other people's responsibilities that aren't meant to be on you. So I found myself in that situation where I just kept thinking about everyone else's well-being before myself. And, it developed into a very toxic situation. And eventually something had to give. I had to make a decision that some people were just not going to be happy with. And two of those had to happen to be my parents. So the biggest game changer for me was definitely moving out. It was very hard to have my parents understand why I moved out. Long story short, I had moved out, secured a new job, and told my parents 2 days before I had to collect my keys. Crazy, there's context, go check out the video. From that point onwards, not being under the same roof as my parents and having that sort of distance created that space for me to be able to have a conversation with them where they're not just seeing me as just a child. I'm still their child, I'm still their daughter, but I am also an adult in my own right. And so having that physical distance allowed my parents and me to have that sort of like adult conversation, to be able to just take a step back and get to know each other properly. And it's an ongoing process. And I feel like once that started, then it was much easier to set boundaries, because as a Somali girl growing up and being the eldest, your boundaries do get disrespected quite a lot. And for me, it took me a while to really understand what was happening, you know, mentally, financially. You just find yourself in situations where you know you're not taking care of yourself first, and it sort of adds up, and then it just really makes you feel like you're stuck all the time. And yeah, it's just not nice. And for me, the road to being able to set boundaries with my parents was very difficult, and it still is to this day. There's still a work in progress, and I think the physical distance does help. However, there does come a point where you need to have those difficult conversations. You need to put your foot down and be like, no, I'm not asking you for permission. I am telling you that I'm an adult. This is what I want to do. This is why I want to do it. And this is how I'm going to go about it. The road to setting boundaries with your parents is not easy. Guys, let me just tell you one thing, yeah? Obviously, it really depends on your situation, your circumstance, your relationship with your parents. But one thing I have noticed, especially with African parents, you cannot wait around for your parents to respect you, because if you don't take ownership of that, it's never gonna happen. It's just not gonna happen. There has to be a point in your life where you have to start flipping asking for permission to stating what you're going to do. It's not a case of, hey, can I do X, Y, Z? Hey, can I pursue X, Y, Z? Hey, can I study X, Y, Z? No. Those questioning and asking for permission in those cases, it has to turn into a statement. And the reason is, when you keep asking questions with your parents, they can only give you guidance based on what they know. When you come from an immigrant family, you have to understand that your parents grew up in a different environment to what you're probably growing up in. So there are moments where their advice is very valuable, but there are times where they just can't give you the full answer that you need and necessarily know what's best for you. So those questions of, you know, seeking permission, that to them translates to hesitation from what I've experienced personally. And so for me, I just went from, oh, I'm going to this event. Oh, I'm pursuing this job, by the way, or I'm pursuing XYZ. It had to change into a statement of what I'm going to do. And then if they want to have a conversation with me, that's on them to set it up. If they've got questions, that's on them to push that forward. Because what will happen is, if you keep asking for permission all the time, you're just not going to get the respect. They're just not going to treat you as an adult of any kind. And, you know, it's not easy. I remember the first time when I was forcing myself to get into that habit, and it was daunting at first. There was a lot of clashing, there was a lot of back and forth, but eventually they just got used to it, simply because when I would make a statement saying, okay, I'm pursuing a career in this, I know it's creative and you're not used to these kinds of jobs, but this is what I'm doing, this is how I'm going to do it, and this is what happens if it doesn't work out. And I think that's another fear as well, because you know your parents have such high expectations for you. Sometimes you're scared of putting your foot down and saying, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, because you're worried about failing. And the thing is, right, like I said, we are growing in a very different environment as to what they grew up on. And so for us, there are some things that we can see as setbacks, but for our parents, it's seen as a failure. We have more opportunities, depending on where you are. I'm just speaking from the UK perspective. Because you're scared of that failure, you might find it hard to set boundaries and be firm in what you're doing, because you're worried that if you fail, you're going to get another lecture from your parents, or you're going to face whatever consequences, and you're worried about that. And the way I got around that is I said, and I still do this, I'm going to try and pursue XYZ because I am interested to see what this does and what that does. I am going to make X decision because I want to know why. That's it. And that sort of like leaves room for me to experiment and explore. And it's also setting them the expectation that this might not work out, and I'm acknowledging that. So that's how I sort of got around that fear of failing in front of my parents and what they're going to say. And the more I practiced that and made it a habit, the easier it sort of got. I can't lie, it's very hard when you're under the same roof as your parents, because there's this whole thing of like, you know, you're under my roof, I'm feeding you, I'm clothing you, I'm looking after you. You know, it's hard. So that sort of was a struggle for me at the time, and it was a bit tense at times, but I just had to suck up and really go for it, because it got to a point where it's like, okay, I'm about to start my 20s. I can't keep going through this in my 20s. Like, I don't want that for myself. And as much as I love and respect my parents, there are some things that they just won't understand. Not because they're not capable, but because they've just not grown up in the same environment that I'm currently growing up in. And at first, they didn't understand it. To this day, they probably don't understand half the things I do and why I do it. But at the end of the day, there's still that mutual respect and care for each other that we have. And I think that just comes with time. If you are someone that's struggling with setting boundaries with your parents, I think the first step before you even get to setting boundaries with your parents is asking yourself how you set boundaries for yourself. Like, what is it that you do to make sure that the people around you, like your friends, people you work with, what is it that you do for yourself so that other people know how to interact with you? Because one thing I noticed for myself is that when I struggled to set boundaries between me and my friends or between me and colleagues, that filtered through with my parents and vice versa. I sat down and figured out what my boundaries were for myself. How do I like to be approached? How do I like to deal with certain situations? What does respect mean for me? How do I go about making decisions, and how do I hold myself accountable so that I follow through with my decisions? Because once I got comfortable with that for myself, it was much easier to then start setting boundaries with people around me, and then eventually my parents. I can still acknowledge that my parents are my parents and they will always be my parents. And they can also acknowledge that I'm always going to be their child, and that's fine, that's healthy. What's not healthy is, you know, invading your child's privacy, constantly questioning your child, or not giving your child the freedom and the space to learn about themselves, to grow. Because for me, the way I understand parenting, a lot of it is influenced by my faith as a Muslim and also by what I've observed. And I see parents as guides. Like, the role of a parent is to raise you, love you, care for you without a sense of entitlement. Because I feel like sometimes, like, parents grow up with this idea of how they want you to turn out to be. And then if you don't turn out that way, that's it, it's the end of the world. And it would be nice for any parents out there who could be watching this, like, please just give your child a break and understand that you can instill values and principles towards your child, but you ultimately don't know exactly how they're going to turn out to be. You can only do your best. And I just wish my parents understood that more. I think now, from what I can understand, my parents just sort of just leave me to get on with it. I know that they're proud of me. I know that they respect me and my decisions, even if they don't agree with it. And they know that I can handle myself. So I think it's just gotten to a point where I've already broken so many barriers and I've already done so many things in such an untraditional way that they've just sort of left me to it. So there's that. Let me know if you want me to turn this into a series, because I've just realized like there's so many things to touch on within this topic. But to sum up, I would say when it comes to setting boundaries with your parents, first of all, figure out what your boundaries for yourself are and sit and reflect as to whether those boundaries are healthy. Then evaluate how you set boundaries with your friends. If you have a partner, evaluate how you set boundaries between you and your partner. And then think about the relationship that you have with your parents and go from there. And at the end of the day, I'm speaking from the experience of a Black Muslim woman who grew up in an immigrant household, who's also the eldest, and it's not easy. It's not easy. When it comes to setting boundaries, it's really not easy. I had to fight my way through it, but I'm grateful that I'm in a position now where, alhamdulillah, like I can actually have those conversations with my parents. There's enough distance where it can be a healthy relationship. And I've just realized, I don't know if this sounds horrible, but I've realized that having a long distance relationship with my parents is a lot better than I thought. Not because I don't want to be around them, but it's just I need that space for myself personally. Obviously, with this whole lockdown situation, it's very different. Like, I actually do miss my parents. I have not seen them for like almost a year now because of this lockdown situation. But yeah, I hope you guys found this video useful, insightful. I just wanted to share my thoughts on what setting boundaries with your parents can look like. There's so much more I actually want to talk about this, so let me know in the comments below what things you want me to touch on within this topic area, and I'll do my best to cover it. It's something that I'm very passionate about. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Please hit the like button and hit the subscribe button and share it with anyone you think will find this useful or will enjoy watching. As you can see, I am trying to make my videos as accessible as I possibly can, because I believe that accessibility should be a standard and not an afterthought. If you would like to support me and my team in continuing to make accessible content, I have a link which I will leave in the description box below, where you can check it out and support however you can. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.